grass, and something else. Something heavy in the air that made the birds go quiet. I had learned, even as a child, that when the birds stopped singing, you stopped breathing so loud. That silence was not peace. That silence was a warning. And on that particular morning, 3.8 million years ago on the open floor of East Africa, that warning was louder than anything I had ever heard in my short, brutal, beautiful life. I was not like you. I walked on 2 feet, yes. I felt hunger the way you feel it, and I felt cold, and I felt fear. But I had no walls around me, no roof above my head. I wrapped myself in wide leaves and stripped bark, pressing them against my body with twisted vine, not for fashion, not for beauty, but for the most basic, desperate kind of dignity. I covered myself because the world around me was sharp and watching, and there was something deep inside me that said, even here, even like this, I am more than just an animal. The leaves scratched my skin, the bark cracked by midday, but I wore them because I was human, even then, especially then. Our tribe moved together every dawn. 26 of us, men, women, the old ones who moved slowly, but saw everything, and the children who clung to their mothers' backs with hands so small and so tight, you could feel their trust in every single finger. We did not choose a path the way you choose a road. We read the land. We watched where the elephants walked, because elephants knew where water was. We watched where the vultures circled, because vultures told us something had already died, and the large predators were feeding, which meant for a short time we were safer. Every animal around us was a living signal, and we had spent our entire lives learning their language. I will tell you about Nara. She was the woman who taught me most of what I know about surviving in that world. She was not the biggest among us, and she was not the loudest. But she understood animals the way others understood fire, instinctively, completely, without needing to think about it. Nara had lived through more seasons than most of us had names for. She wore a wrap of wide fig leaves layered over dry grass. Tied at her waist with a long strip of bark she retied every morning like a ritual. She walked barefoot and knew every sound the grass made underfoot, which meant she also knew when something else was walking through it nearby. It was Nara who first told me about the lion. There was a young lioness who lived on the eastern edge of our territory. We had seen her many times, always at a distance, always alone. Young lions without a pride were dangerous, unpredictable, starving, with nothing to lose. We gave her space. We always gave lions space. But one dry season, when the river had pulled back and the animals were gathering at the last shallow pool we all shared, something happened that I have never forgotten. The lioness came to the water while Nara was there alone, collecting water in a hollow gourd. They saw each other. Neither ran. They stood there for a long time, separated by maybe 20 steps, and they just looked at each other. Nara did not raise her voice. She did not throw a stone. She crouched slowly, kept her eyes soft, and continued collecting her water. And the lioness walked to the edge of the pool and drank, side by side, a woman wrapped in bark and leaves, and a young lion wrapped in hunger and loneliness. They drank from the same water. They breathed the same air. And from that day, the lioness began to follow our tribe at a distance, close enough to feel, far enough to deny. Nara always knew when she was near. She would pause mid-step and look into the tall grass with something in her eyes that was not fear. It was recognition. Two creatures separated by everything, connected by something neither one could name. I think about that now and understand. In a world where everything was trying to kill you, even a dangerous thing could be a kind of company. But the gorilla, that is a different story. And it belongs to a woman named Selah. Sella was young when it happened. She had wandered too far from the group, following a trail of wild berries into the forest edge, where the trees thickened and the light turned green. A juvenile mountain gorilla separated from his group found her there among the berry bushes. He was enormous, even young, black fur, quiet eyes, hands the size of her face. She froze. He did not charge. He sat down, which is what gorillas do when they want to say, "I am not a threat." Sella, because she had grown up watching animals her entire life, understood this. She sat down too. They spent an entire afternoon near each other. He watched her eat. She watched him eat. He reached out once and touched the edge of her leaf wrap, slowly, curiously, the way a child touches something it does not understand. She let him. There was no violence in it. There was something almost tender, a massive, powerful creature being gentle with something smaller and strange, and a young woman being brave enough to sit still long enough to receive it. When the sun started falling and she rose to leave, he rose too and watched her go. He did not follow her into the open grassland. He stayed at the tree line, watching until she disappeared. Sella never forgot him. She spoke about him for the rest of her life, not with fear, with a kind of wonder that I understood completely, because in that world, wonder was rare, and when something touched it in you, you held it. The storm came on the 5th day of that month. I had felt storms before, but never one like this. The sky did not gradually darken. It changed like something slamming shut. One moment blue, the next, a wall of black cloud moving so fast that the birds did not have time to flee. The temperature dropped so sharply I felt it in my chest before I felt it on my skin. And then the rain came sideways, violent and cold, and the ground we had been standing on became a river in minutes. We ran. There was no meeting, no discussion, no vote. Nara pointed uphill, and we ran because she pointed, and she was never wrong. The children were grabbed and held against chests. The old ones were held by the arms and pulled forward. I remember the water rising around my ankles, then my knees, as the valley floor flooded. I remember the sound, not just rain, but trees cracking, rocks shifting, the earth groaning under a force it was being forced to swallow. We reached the rocky hillside as darkness fell. We found a shallow overhang in the rock face, not big, not comfortable, and we pressed ourselves into it together. 26 bodies sharing heat, sharing breath, sharing the particular terror of listening to a storm try to destroy the world outside, while you count the people beside you and silently beg the number not to change. The big animals were moving in the chaos below. I could hear the elephants, that deep, rolling rumble they made when frightened, moving north in a line I could feel through the rock beneath me. I heard something I thought was a tree falling and realized it was a hippopotamus, rolling into the swollen river. Everything that lived in that valley was being rearranged. And somewhere in the darkness, I knew the predators were moving too, not hunting in that weather, but looking like us for somewhere solid to stand. We stayed in that overhang for 3 days. We ate nothing the first day. On the second, the men crept out in daylight and found a termite mound cracked open by a fallen branch. And we ate what was inside, every one of us, without a single word of complaint. Termites were protein. Protein was survival. Dignity in that world was not about what you ate. It was about still being alive to eat it. On the 3rd morning, the storm broke. And when I walked out onto that hillside and looked down at the valley below, transformed, wet, shining, broken in some places and strangely new in others, I felt something rise in me that I could not have described but recognized completely. We had survived. Not just the storm, not just the flood. We had survived everything that had tried to end us. The predators, the hunger, the cold, the dark, the 3 days of nothing but each other and the sound of water. And we were still here. Nara stood beside me on that hillside, her leaf wrap half shredded from the wind, her gray hair wet and flat against her face. She looked out at the valley for a long time. Then she looked at me, and she said nothing. But she touched my arm once. The way you touch something when you want to say you are still here. And so am I, and that is everything. I am speaking to you now from across 3.8 million years, and I want you to hear this clearly. I had no home with walls. I covered my body with leaves and bark tied with vine, and I called that dignity because it was. I read the sky to know the weather, read the animals to know the danger, read the silence to know the death. I formed bonds with creatures that should have killed me, and sometimes, in the space between fear and trust, something extraordinary happened. I survived a storm that should have ended us, and I kept walking, because stopping was never an option. You are here right now, because every single one of my people kept walking. Do not ever forget what you are made of. If this story reached something in you, something deep and old and real, then hit like right now and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this. And tell me in the comments, which moment hit you the hardest? I read every single one. Thank you for being here. Never stop walking.